Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
This is something that's always made me really paranoid at night. Sure enough, it's a camping story. Be me, 2 years ago. Went on a camping trip to Red River Gorge, Kentucky. Me, 2 friends, Pat and John's cousin Carter. Before the trip, Pat thought it was a cool idea to brew his own cheap moonshine and fill an entire rolly cooler with mason jars full of it. Spend most of the day packing and hyping the trip. Head down to Red River Gorge and make it around 5 p.m. with Pat. Drive around for an hour before finding the spot. John and Carter are already there and set up about half a mile in or so. Right as we pull up to the parking area, we come across a police checkpoint. I completely forgot about the moonshine. Pat's calmer than Slug, good with cops. He rolls down the window. "Hey officer, what's all this about?" "Just making sure the kids coming through here are being safe." "Why wouldn't we be safe?" Hear the cop behind them interject quietly with, "No, don't tell them," or something odd like that. "Just making sure nobody is getting into trouble at all. Now you wouldn't have anything on you we'd need to know about, would you?" My heart drops as soon as he says it, realizing that in the same cooler we have burgers and bacon. Drug Dog gets out of the car, circles ours, actually thinking he'll signal because of the burger meat like an idiot. No signal, instant relief. Cop chimes back in, "Y'all kids be safe on your way in, try to make it to your camp before it gets dark." "Sure thing, officer." We drive literally 30 seconds up the road to the parking spot. Still nervous about the moonshine even after we got away with it, so important. I don't drink, just don't care for it. I remember being really mad at Pat for a little bit because I didn't want to go to jail for shit I didn't even partake in. Unload our junk, collect our gear, and prepare to march out. Pat thinks it'd be cool to haul the entire cooler through the woods. Before we head out, I turn around and see that the police checkpoint is just gone. No lights, sounds, anything. Turn back around, Pat's calling John to let him know we're starting the hike, with the cooler. John says don't bring it. I really wish we hadn't. Pat says it's full of shine and he didn't brew it for nothing. Good luck arguing with Pat. We begin hiking. Luckily, Pat wanted to drag the cooler around. It's taking us forever and it's getting dark. Bust out the flashlights to see where we're going. Keep having to stop and lift the cooler over obstacles. Really heavy. Finally, it's too dark to see without the flashlights, so I have to keep them on. John calls us. "Hey guys, I think we hear you coming." "Shout something." Pat yells, "You're a spurg." As soon as he yells, I hear something skitter in the leaves on the ridge to our right. Shine my light instinctually. Nothing. Spook is starting to set in. "Did you hear me, John?" "No, I guess we heard someone else." "Okay, well, we're gonna keep moving." Pat hangs up and we continue to haul the damn cooler along. An hour probably goes by before John calls us again. "Where the hell are you guys?" "We're following the path. I know we aren't lost." "Oh, I think I can see your flashlight. Wave it around." Pat does. "Yeah, that's totally you guys. We're coming up to help." Hangs up. We stop to rest and wait for them. A few seconds pass, then we hear them walking towards us up the hill, crunching leaves, and then past us. Pat speaks up. "Hey, where are you guys? We're back this way." I hear John's voice in front of us. Definitely spooked because we heard something walk at what seemed like a human pace right past us. Thoroughly spooked, ready to set our stuff up and be around other people. John and Carter both walk up and help us bring the gear down. Right before we leave the campsite, Pat slips and drops the cooler down some hill. Half the mason jars of shine are shattered. Pat's pissed. Gather what we can, load it back up, and take the rest of it to the camp. As we walk away, I swear I hear something shuffle down the hill. We dropped the shine in and moved around. "Spook meter full," I say. "Guys, did you hear that? I swear to God somethings are moving around out there." Carter, having been on many camping trips, assures me it's just deer scoping us out at a safe distance. Somewhat reassuring, but why would a deer walk down a steep hill into some cramped hole? Time passes, we set our stuff up, light a fire, start cooking, and get to drinking. All of us are sitting around the campfire just shooting the shit. Look around and notice an oddly shaped shadow next to a big rock by a stream, maybe 50 feet away if that. Figure it's my brain playing tricks on me from a filled spook meter. Don't really say anything. Every few minutes I glance over at the creepy shadow, almost hoping it moves to confirm my suspicions. It doesn't, thank goodness. Carter gets up to take a piss in the stream and walks towards where the spooky shadow was. eyes glued to Carter, totally nervous. He pisses, turns back around and walks back to us. The shadow is gone. Fucking gone. Spook meter rupture. Carter sits back down and says, "Hey, did you guys spill any shine over by the stream?" None of us have even been over there until now, so no. Smells like it. Why, for the rest of the night I kept my eyes over where the shadow was, seeing nothing. At this point, everyone but me is hammered. Finally calm my nerves as we all lay down in our tents. Everyone is in their own tent, have trouble staying asleep because it's cold. Keep waking up through the night. Unzip my tent to see Pat standing right outside. "Whoa, dude. What are you doing out there?" "It's really cold and I don't have a blanket. Can I sleep next to you?" "Sure, let me take a piss first." Leaving the tent, Pat sits down outside the tent. Walk around the other side of my tent because screw the stream, I ain't walking over there. Piss, turn back around, see Pat standing up by the stream, probably pissing as well. Go back in the tent. Pat's in the tent. Nope. Get in the tent and slowly zip the tent up, leave a space open to see. Not going to sleep with someone out there. Take a peek. Realize it's not someone. See a tall, lanky figure, maybe 7 feet tall, stretched arms, skinny legs, and what looked like long hair. For those of you who have played Darkest Dungeon, think of a skinnier, lankier ghoul, petrified. Can't take my eyes away from it. Look over at Pat, fast asleep. Look back outside, it's sitting in the same spot where I saw the spooky shadow. It's been there the whole time. Suddenly a waft of moonshine hits my nose. It's coming from outside. Put the pieces together. This thing likes our alcohol. It's probably what skittered after the shine when we dropped it. Too scared to move, keep my eyes trained on it. After what felt like hours, the thing stood up again. It lifted its arm up and shook it around. Then it dropped something, crouched down and bolted through the stream and through whatever was over there. I didn't know what to do. Sat there until morning. Everyone wakes up. Say nothing about it before investigating the area. Look around. See our empty mason jars spread around. Could have been the dudes because drunk. Walk over to where the shadow was at night. There's a divot in the sand that I only could think of as a butt print. It was just sitting there. Look to my right. One empty mason jar lies. Pick it up and smell it. No trace of alcohol, but it smelled foul, dumbfounded. Not really sure what to do. Don't tell anyone what I saw. Nobody talks about it, probably didn't see it or can't remember the night prior. Go to cook breakfast. Surprisingly, the leftover meat is still there. Eat, pack up, haul out. Pat and the dudes want to stay another night. I made up some bullshit story about how I have a school project to work on. Pat reluctantly agrees to drive me home. On the way home, I tried to spark a convo about last night. Next time, bring your own blanket. Dude, whatever, I didn't know it would be that cold. It's fucking October, dude, come on. Whatever, I'll take one when I go back. You're going back? You're not gonna stay home? Nah, I'm gonna meet back up with them and stay another night at a different spot. Good. Good? Yeah, man, don't go back to where we were. I think some other campers drank the rest of our shine while we were asleep. Really? Damn, I thought it was the others. Yeah, just pick a spot further away. Sure, dude. I froze up and never told him or any of them what I saw that night. I wasn't drunk, I wasn't sleep deprived. I know I saw something out there. Maybe it was some tall, skinny dude, but Jesus Christ, I doubt it, and the hair. And the fact it sat there all night. I don't know, I'm convinced it wasn't a person. The worst part is that we weren't even that far in. Sure, it was about a half-mile in, but it's not like the campsites we're in the sticks or something. Red River Gorge is a common tourist attraction. Needless to say, I haven't gone camping since then.
I regularly go for nature walks and hikes with a good friend of mine who has a knack for finding out some good places to visit. This one time he decided we'd check out a particular gorge which apparently had a fairly safe means of descending to the bottom to walk alongside the river. Sounded good. After an hour and a half's drive, we get to the place. The gorge stretches and winds for what looks like miles before a tree line cuts off our view from the stony bridge we parked along. It's easily close to 80 feet deep, with a somewhat calm river stream flowing through the middle. The one thing I remember being excited about was, in the light of the high noon sun, we could see the inside of the gorge quite clearly. The lower layers of rock were made of some kind of red sandstone, and in that light it made the river look blood red. It looked awesome, and we were both eager for a closer look. Now came the tricky part of finding our way down. The edges of the gorge descended into a steep slope before ending in a sheer drop. It was only when I started looking down said slopes that I developed a case of vertigo. I pretty much discovered that I was afraid of heights that day. In my nervousness, I stayed at the top of the slope, while Comrade Anan braved down the steeper embankments to get a closer look at the edge. I could only mutter a begrudging, "Watch your footing," as he laughed at my abrupt case of faggotry. I wanted to go down, I really did, but taunting images of me slipping on a patch of wet grass, hanging for dear life off the side, or feeling a sudden rush of a perilous drop, froze my feet to the spot. My friend's feet were not as frozen as mine, however, because halfway down the slope he lunged forward in like a swan dive and tumbled erratically down the slope towards the edge of the gorge. On his way down, he slammed into a withered old tree and clung to it for dear life. With a mix of fearful caution and worried desperation, I started to make my own descent down the slope after him. I was trying to think up some words of reassurance, but all I could blurt out was a mix of "oh shit," "fuck," "oh," and words to that effect. By the time I reached him, his face was bright red, as if he had been strangled. Turns out his lower half was dangling over the edge, and he had been struggling to pull himself up. I felt bad about not getting down there quicker, but once back at the top of the slope, my friend is supremely pissed off, shoving me backward, exclaiming, "Why did you push me?" "I didn't," I replied angrily. He didn't believe me. "You fucking idiot, I almost died, you fucking prick." The argument lasted only briefly. I sincerely and repeatedly mentioned that I wouldn't do anything that damned stupid, and to top it off, I was standing at the top of the slope, nowhere near where he'd been. He seemed to reluctantly accept my explanation, second-guessing himself, I guess, and we drove back in awkward silence that afternoon. To this day, he swears he felt someone push him, and I remember the moment he fell like a frozen mental snapshot that just burned itself into my eyes. He didn't slip or lose his footing. It looked like he had lunged down the slope, like a salmon trying to leap above the water, like he'd been pushed forcefully. For all I know, maybe he was trying to self-terminate himself or something, then tried to blame it on a phantom when he lost his nerve and changed his mind while dangling off that edge. I'm not one to believe in ghosts, but you guys like this stuff, so I figured I'd share. So yeah, true story. My friend didn't speak to me a few weeks after that sudden plunge, but when he started to ease out of his butt hurt, I asked about the gorge we visited. Armed with its name, I did find some interesting notes about it, namely that it had been closed off to the public due to the number of deaths surrounding the area, with tourists, hikers, and gorge walkers all slipping and falling into it. It seems it claims lives regularly. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed my tale.
Red River Gorge, Kentucky is a beautiful and huge park full of wildlife, rock climbing, waterfalls, dense forest, gorges, and beautiful views. This is a place that feels truly isolated and disconnected from the rest of the world. One fall evening, my girlfriend and I decided to go camping at the gorge. We found a campground that was as backwoods as possible. The sites were spread far from each other. Our site was on the edge of a very steep drop. We arrived at sunset and quickly got to setting up camp. By the time we were fully set up, the sun had set, and we began to make a fire. About 20 minutes into relaxing by the fire, we began to hear howling that didn't sound too far away. We were both freaked out by the realization there were wolves nearby, but we tried not to overreact and continued to sit by our fire. 10 minutes later, I started to hear a faint yelling about 15 feet away, past the cliff edge. I told to be quiet and listen, and we both froze out of fear. Now a woman was screaming. I couldn't make out any words at that point, but it was a deep guttural shriek, a noise that I have never heard a person make in real life. Then I heard it. She was screaming, "Help me, somebody please, oh my God, someone please help me." Repeating this over and over, howling at the top of her lungs. I was terrified. She could have been turned around in the dark and fallen off the cliff, or she could have been attacked by the wolves, a bear, bitten by a snake. At this point, we both sprinted to my hybrid, frantically climbed inside and locked the doors. I tried calling the police, but I had no service. I threw the car in reverse and sped down the dirt road to find anyone who could help. The shrieks continued. I didn't make it far before coming across a group of 3 guys standing on the edge of the forest. I slowed down and cracked my window, still hearing the woman begging for help, and asked the men if they heard that. How could they not hear it? I told them I heard a woman crying for help in the forest, and 2 of them went sprinting into the darkness of the forest without questioning me any further. The other one just stood by my hybrid, assuring me he had no idea what was happening. While the 2 dudes were somewhere in the forest,
I drove farther down the dirt road until I found a spot to turn around. When I came back, the screaming had stopped, and the guys were back by the side of the road. I slowed down and asked them where the woman was, and one of them who had run into the woods answered, "Don't worry. It's funny, actually. It was just a little kid at a campsite further down the trail. He was having a nightmare." I just said okay, and drove away as quickly as possible. We left the campsite and went straight home. Once out of the woods, we called the local police station multiple times with no answer. I know it wasn't a child. I have never heard such primal, fearful screams in my life. It makes my skin crawl and my heart race just to think about it. What did those dudes get away with that night? What was I a witness to?
I have no idea what we saw exactly that night. I have searched everywhere for sightings, or even myths around the area where we saw it, and have found nothing. I haven't heard anyone else say they've seen anything like it in Red River Gorge, Kentucky. I guess I want help figuring out what we saw and what to do. After the night I'm about to describe, but I think we've had some close encounters with it since. My friends and I go camping a lot, and my favorite place is in Red River Gorge, Kentucky. We go there often, and I've been ever since I was an infant. I'm 28 now, married with a kid, and still going. It is the closest place to where I live where you can see the Milky Way pretty much every night. It's perfect for stargazing, and I've seen a shooting star every clear night I've been there. When we go without our kid, we will night hike to a good lookout point and stargaze for hours. On our first night, we went hiking the trails we knew well, and were used frequently during the day. Ones with log fences and gazebo resting places. The most used trail is a trail in Natural Bridge State Park that leads up to the Natural Bridge. This trail is around 2 miles uphill depending on your starting point. I've done this trail every summer of my life and could do it blindfolded. It has wooden steps, carved rock steps, log handrails, multiple sitting points under a roof, and trash cans. But after reaching the main trailhead, it has no lights at all. It's used often, and while it is uphill, the difficulty is low. As long as you have a good grip on your shoes and water, you'll be fine. My friends have done it with me multiple times and are confident in it as well. Hiking this trail at night is not allowed. But it's the woods, and I've never really been one to care about closing times for the literal outside. When we used this main trail to hike to the top, we would park in a lot designated for the pool and Hoedown Island. You walk across the road that leads to the pool, and you at the first trail marker. You go up gravel for a while, and past the Natural Bridge State Park Lodge. There's a waterfall, and some lights, so it was best to go fast and watch out for rangers that would tell us to leave. Then you walk across another road, and there's a mini shelter to sit in, or a small rock wall to rest your legs. Then it's the beginning of the trail to the top. The night was weird to begin with. As soon as we started the hike, the clouds took over and it appeared we'd be walking for nothing to even stargaze at. But we went anyway, just in case it cleared out by the time we got up there. In the beginning, it was just normal paranoia that was keeping us stressed and quiet, it seemed. You know you've reached the bottom of the bridge when you see a giant wall of limestone. During this time, there was a gazebo that sat to the right of this wall, and the trail continued and followed next to the wall. Where you come from is a fairly steep part of the trail, and the gazebo is welcomed. My husband, my best friend at the time, and I all sat on the gazebo steps. The bench is under a roof and even darker than the rest of outside, so we just stayed on the steps, facing where we are looking down the trail that follows the limestone wall. We each have a bright LED headlamp and a handheld flashlight. We don't usually look at each other when we hike at night because the lights are so bright. We sit in a line like the Lord's Supper and walk in a line or staggered so we don't blind ourselves. It is after hours at this point. No ski lift rides had gone on for hours, and the rangers had already done their sweep and left right before we got out of the car and headed up. We left no time between them, making sure the trail and top were clear and starting our hike up. The ski lift takes you up the top, but some workers stay and do counts, and only leave after it's clear. I guess I have to make these points because that's what I was thinking. When what seemed out of nowhere, a girl with a headlamp began to walk down the trail we were looking out at. She is in a sundress and flip-flops. This hike is uphill, and while it is a fairly easy hike, it is not easy with no water or real shoes. She'd have to have hiked up and down to this point with no food or water. Her light was bright, and when she reached where the trail turns from in front of the gazebo to down where we came from, she stopped. She just stood there straight on, like how a human is presented in an anatomical drawing. She was looking directly at us all sitting there, and her light made me bring my hand up to shield my eyes. She didn't turn away from our lights at all, or even seem bothered. She had 6 LED lights aimed directly at her face. I said, "Hello." She said, kind of with a pause between every word, something like, "Hello, how are you?" I said something like, "Good, how are you?" And she took even longer pauses and said, "Oh, I'm fine." She then just stood there still with her hands at her side and facing and staring at us. Her light made it impossible to really see her face, and it was so bright, I had my hand up the entire time until she just turned and walked slowly down the trail part we had just come up. She got to a part where the trail turned, and we saw her light just stay in that one spot for a minute, until she turned, and the light faded out of sight. We wait for a while before continuing up. I kept making comments about how weird that was, and everyone else just made it out to be me always being afraid. But no one ever came after her. She had done this hike alone, at night, and somehow without being found by any ranger. We got up after a bit and started back up to the top. It felt like it took much longer than it ever had in the past, but we made it to the top. There are stone steps named Fat Man Squeeze that get you to the top of the bridge, and you can walk across it and whatever. Going up and being on the top, we could hear twigs snapping, almost alternating from the left and the right. We lay down and try to stargaze, but the clouds are even thicker now. It was miserably hot. We could hear voices at times, and my husband kept checking for people we heard. He never saw anyone. We saw a light flash, never saw anyone attached to it, and then we heard a bird call, but it wasn't like a real bird noise at all. It sounded like a person making bird calls, like rhythmic and not really natural. I was convinced we weren't alone and hadn't been alone, but also I am the most easily spooked. I asked to leave as soon as they were ready to, and they were ready right then and there. And that scared me, that they were just as afraid as me at this point. We began going down the way we came, and it felt like it was taking so long. We were going steady and quick, and it was downhill, but we were not making any ground, it seemed. It's hard to explain, but it was so weird that at one point I even said it out loud. I said, "This feels much longer," and they agreed with me. I kept looking behind me with the flashlight, and my husband kept looking out to the sides, and my friend kept hers mostly forward. I kept feeling watched and couldn't figure out what footsteps were ours, or if they were all ours that I heard. I would turn in the direction of any noise but not see anything. When my husband was walking, he kept saying he was catching eyes in his flashlight. Usually, you can catch raccoon eyes spying on you or some animal like that. He was afraid maybe a bear or big dog or something, and he never got his lights on whatever eyes were long enough to see an animal's size or shape. Now we're hiking down a semi-flattish area, compared to the downhill hike we've been doing at least. The log fence or handrail or whatever it's called is on our right side. We are in a row walking within reaching distance of this barrier, and my husband just stops walking altogether and says, "What's that?" But the question is more of like an alert, and I move my hand lamp in that direction and don't see anything at first. Then both of his lights catch a shape, and then my headlamp catches it, and I move my hand lamp to the center and catch it while my friend simultaneously finds it in her lights as well. All 6 lights shine onto and kind of reflect off of a light gray creature. It is bent in a crouching position, kneeling on its right leg, and starts turning towards us. It starts to slowly stand, and my mind is racing still. It looks human, but it is too big. People mistake human shapes for what's actually bears in the woods often, but this is skinny. It is thin and big and almost white. It's so light gray, and its skin resembles dolphin skin. There's a shine to it, and our lights get reflected a little when they're on it. It gradually comes to a full standing position in front of us. Its head is long, and its eyes are in a human position on the face in front, and not on the side like animals, but I could not see any other facial features. Just big, almost empty holes or pits that were its eyes. It looked directly at us and our lights. The way it stood was intimidating, almost like when a snake raises up and flexes its neck all crazy to show prey that they're stronger and smarter. It was like it was stepping up to a fight. From crouching, then turning, then standing in front of us, the arms hung down low, and the hands seemed long too. Its hands had to be by its knees. I'd guess it stood 9 feet or so, and not that far in front of us. No hair at all, and its head was large as well. I couldn't process what I saw and was frozen. Then I just feel my husband hitting me on the back and yelling, "Run, run, run!" I start to understand we have to get away from this thing, and it pivots and runs to the right, going backward on the trail so it could get around the barrier and onto the trail behind us. We take off running the rest of the way down the trail, knowing that this thing just took off much faster than us, and after it had crossed from behind the barrier, it would be gaining on us quickly. We didn't talk at all, because when we tried it felt almost like we would get caught. We keep running as we can, but some areas are so steep. It never felt like we were out of sight of this creature. As we made it to the trail beginning with the gravel, we could hear something to the side crashing down through the forest. We ran until we got to the car, and then we drove as fast as we could as soon as we got to the main road, then cleared up, and the stars were out. When that thing looked at us, I knew it was smarter and faster than us. I knew that if we hadn't seen it, it could have easily taken one of us and gotten away. I think the only reason it hesitated was because so many of us saw it at once, and we stayed together. When we made it back to where we were staying, all of us took out our phones and wrote a note for what we saw happen. We hadn't spoken about it until after we looked at each other's phones and the stories were the same. Without a doubt, we had all seen something real.
Be in the Appalachians near Red River Gorge. 4-day trip alone. Bag full of the essentials and Ruger 1022 with a few extra mags of ammo. Be hiking in a greenery. Putrid smell. Rustling sound coming from nearby bush. Late 40s man jumps out, messed up teeth, bushy beard, knife in hand. Got any cash on you? I'm fucking camping. What the fuck am I going to buy in the fucking forest? Anyone else with you? No, just me and my rifle. Shake rifle around. He turns and disappears into the greenery. I wish I had a sidearm with me. Guy gave me the creeps. I woke up the next morning to him peeing like 15 feet from my tarp.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check the Odyssey and Rumble pages for separate archives of previous broadcasts.